There's a saying out there, just because you can afford a practice doesn't mean you can absorb a practice. It's a lot of hard work. And there's a lot of work up front in really making sure that you are, thinking through as much of the details as possible, particularly as it relates to the client experience and the employee experience.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Next Mile. I'm your host, Kyle Van Pelt, co-founder at Milemarker. And today I am joined by Carrie Delgott. Carrie is the president, COO, and CCO at Wescott Financial Advisory Group. She is also a yogi, a boglehead, and an all-around very interesting person that I'm excited to have a conversation with. Carrie, thanks for joining the show.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. I am delighted for what we're going to talk about today. And I'm going to start this conversation off with you the same way I start every other conversation off with all of our guests. So I've found that everybody has a unique path to our industry, Carrie. Some of those unique paths involve a traditional set of footsteps where they followed maybe what their grandparents did and, their parents or something like that, or maybe some relative has been in this industry and they followed those footsteps. Other people didn't even know this industry existed. They were off doing something completely different, and they came into our space through the side door. But what we found is whether your path is traditional or untraditional, everybody has what we call a money moment. And so I'm curious, Carrie, for you, what was that money moment that led you to sitting in the chair you're in right now, having this conversation with me?
My money moment. So I've been in financial services for over 25 years now.
Okay.
So I'm not going to take it all the way back to the beginning. I actually think the money moment I'd like to share with you is more around a transition that I made a little over 6 years ago. So I spent the first 20 years of my career, a large corporate organization that everybody knows called Vanguard. And I rotated around the world of Vanguard, many different types of roles and opportunities. I changed positions probably, every 18 months to 2 years. I held positions in corporate strategy, chief of staff, lots of strategic program management for a period of time. I ran their ultra high net worth business. And I was approached by an individual that said to me, hey, there's this really unique opportunity that I think you'd be interested in. I'd love for you to take a call. So the power of network. Cannot underestimate. And I took the call, and the call was with the founder and CEO of Wescott, Grant Rawdon. And we just started talking about the opportunity to join him at that point in time as chief operating officer. And it wasn't something that I would have thought of or considered, but I was really thinking about the difference between my world at Vanguard and what this new world would look and feel like at Wescott. And it was intriguing. It was very interesting for me to think about what that opportunity would be like, and no regrets. 6 years later, having tons of fun, but a big move, a lot of change.
That is a lot of change, and that is a big move. I appreciate you sharing that. And so I want to actually talk a little bit about Wescott, because you shared some interesting things with me off the air before we started recording this, things that I think make Wescott pretty unique. One of which is that you all are a B Corp. So let's talk about that. And for those who don't know, who are listening to this, can you explain what a B Corp is? And then I think it is interesting that an advisory firm did get set up as a B Corp. So talk to us about how that actually gets put into practice after you define what the B Corp is.
Certainly, B Corp certification is not unique to financial services. It was actually born out of most product development manufacturing. So from the service organization, adoption is fairly new. And I completely agree with you. Very few financial services organizations have achieved the B Corp certification. It is a framework. It's a framework to hold an organization accountable to using its power for good. Really be thinking about how that organization is doing as it relates to employee engagement and benefits, and what they're leveraging the appropriate supply chain, impact on the environment, taking into consideration is they're making business decisions, business decisions that aren't just all about profits, but really thinking about better in this world. And it became popular. Some of the names, Patagonia and Athleta, et cetera.
Yeah.
I think they're probably some of the most recognized B Corp organizations. But we have been since inception very philanthropic, very community oriented, very diverse in the employees that are within our organization. We've got some terrific benefits packages. So for instance, one of, I think, the differentiators for Wescott is we offer VTO days, volunteer time off days, in addition to PTO days, so that people can go out and give back to the community. And so the concept was brought to us by a peer firm and a suggestion made, you guys probably would fare pretty well. You should consider the certification. So we were certified in 2020 for the first time. And then I went through the recertification process, which takes place every 3 years in 2023. And it's a framework. It's a tough framework. You're scored. You receive your grade at the end as to how well you do in various different categories.
That's super interesting to me because I knew about B Corps and the concept of them. I didn't know there was a scoring or a grading of them. I kind of thought it was a pass fail. Like you either maintain your B Corp status or you don't, but there's levels to this is what you're saying.
There are levels to this, and you can even be recognized in certain categories as, an overachiever. I'll say, maybe in the employee category or the philanthropic community category, et cetera. There is certainly a threshold where you are not going to be considered certified. So there's a failing mark that does take place, but we do receive literal scores.
Okay, so this feels... don't take this the wrong way, but it feels like kind of an unnecessary thing for a financial advisory practice to do. I mean, you could just choose to be philanthropic. You could just choose to serve people. You could just choose to do these things. But yet you guys chose to have this as a standard set by the firm. Why? I mean, why is this something that was so important to you that you went all the way to being a B Corp rather than just taking the actions that a B Corp would?
No, I would say it's the discipline. We went into this with a learning mindset, not really knowing the process and really having an understanding of B Corps similar to what you just described. Sort of, I've seen it on some department store logos, et cetera. And as I was going through the process, I realized there was a lot of idea generation. We don't do that. That's an interesting idea, right? Because they're getting into some of the specific areas of opportunity and using that as some guidelines of areas that we wanted to pursue further. And I also felt really good about sharing the certification with our employees. I mean, this really isn't something that I would say attracts prospective clients. We have been noted. I see you're a B Corp and I know what that is and means. And, the value alignment is there sometimes. It's much more about the employees and prospective talent. So talent attraction, of course, in our industry is extremely important. And when young advisors or, other leaders, we're meeting with them for a position opening that we have, I am asked 9 times out of 10 about that certification. People want to be a part of being good. And they understand that, again, we're bringing about those values in a very positive way, in a very public way, and aligning to their interests. So we've found it to be beneficial from a couple different vantage points. It's not about putting some sort of a trophy on a shelf.
Wow, that's awesome. I love that answer. It's a decent segue into something else I wanted to talk to you about, though. So you and Grant are also a part of something called the Net Positive Consortium. So it seems like a lot of what you all have tried to do with the B Corp designation, being a part of Net Positive Consortium, this is all very intentional and deliberate. But tell us about Net Positive Consortium, what that is, and why you all decided to be a part of it.
The Net Positive Consortium is a cadre of forward-looking organizations, and this is very specific to the RIA and wealth management industry. And these are organizations that have programs in place, similar to what we just described, Wescott having a lot of programs in place that allowed us to pursue the B Corp certification. And they want to get together and make an even bigger impact by sharing resources, sharing best practices, and bringing others along that might not be as far into their journey. So we really oriented around 5 pillars. They're very similar to the 5 pillars of the B Corp certification: community, clients, team members or your employees, the industry, and the planet. And so what programs and initiatives and commitments do you have in place around each of those? And again, a lot of story sharing, a lot of information sharing, and then talking to other organizations about where they might be in their journey and helping to bring them along. The concept comes from a book. The book is titled Net Positive: How Courageous Companies Thrive by Giving More Than They Take. And the author there is Paul Pullman and Andrew Winston. So if you want to learn a little bit more about the concept of net positive, book recommendation, and then the Net Positive Consortium also has a website, the netpositivewealth.com. So it's been fun. Very, very early days. So we're founding members. We really just got up and running fallish timeframe of last year, but we're attracting some terrific organizations that want to be a part of something great.
That's super cool. Yeah, it just seems like you all have really taken a very thoughtful and different approach to how you're building an RIA. And I think that's great because a lot of the times a conversation I have or something that seems to come up often is, how do you differentiate yourself, right? So many RIAs, I think, are offering such a noble and wonderful service to the world, helping people achieve their hopes and their dreams, helping them tackle their fears about money, all of that stuff. It's great. But a lot of times it's tough for them to stand out and differentiate. And it seems like you all have taken a really intentional approach to doing so.
Yeah, we also have a framework that we leverage called Life-Minded Wealth. And I guess it's similar. It's not about just the data and the stats. Let's not just sit down and go through your cash flow and talk about your investment returns. Let's really think about your goals and your values, and think very holistically about how finances plays into your world, your interests, your family, much more so. So life-minded wealth, I mean, you can sort of tell it bleeds through various different areas, including the way we engage clients.
Yeah, that's great. And I want to double click on that and talk about that a little bit more, because we found that when we were researching for this podcast that you kind of have this trademark proven process called life-minded wealth. And it seems like it's more about putting people at the heart of things than portfolios. A lot of people talk about planning. A lot of people talk about asset allocation. There's all these things. But again, at the end of the day, this business is about serving people and making sure they're taken care of. So I want to actually take a step back and ask, how was the life-minded approach to wealth developed? Where did that come from?
It was developed before my time in partnership with a marketing firm and really understanding our people. And I think that when they were interviewing all of the various different advisors, they were just finding this to be a theme and a trend throughout. We did recently breathe new life into that concept in articulating it, I think, a little bit better. So it's been something that we've leveraged as a phrase for many moons, but we're really starting to talk a lot more about integrating life goals and values and aspirations into every aspect of wealth planning and strategy. I think more so today than we had been historically. And it is truly holistic. So you really get more than just the financial advisor. There is a team orientation to our service model. There are estate experts or subject matter experts, tax experts, of course, the investment team, insurance. And these individuals all are a part of the planning depending on client need.
So I want to talk to you about scale, but I want to kind of take a little bit of a path to get there. So I love it when I hear RIAs talk about this proven process that they have and how you've built that out and things like that. And then inherently where my mind goes is, okay, how do you think about doing that as you grow, as you're adding more households and things like that? And you all have grown quite a bit. I mean, you've doubled in, pretty quick amount of time from 2 billion to 4 billion, according to my numbers. I'm not sure if those are totally right. But when you're growing that fast, you start to think about how to do these things in a more productive way. And just some foreshadowing, you had said something to me off air that I loved. It's been sticking in my brain, which was, scale is relative, right? So scale is relative, and we can talk about that a little bit. But you came from a place, Vanguard, that now to date has just under 10 trillion with a T dollars in assets. I mean, that's scale, right? To a crazy degree, versus scale as it relates to a couple $1 billion RIA is how do we run the life-minded wealth approach across, all of our households and prospects and things like that. So what's the answer there? So I'd just be curious to hear you kind of riff on that, because I think everybody's trying to figure out scale for what it means for their business at this point in time.
Sure. And the landscape has changed so quickly in such a short duration of time. So the RIA business is certainly talking a lot about scale. I saw some statistics recently that in 2011, there were 10 RIAs managing 10 billion or more in assets. And as of year-end 2024, and I'm willing to bet there's more as we're well into the second quarter of 2025, there were over a dozen RIAs with $50 billion or more in assets.
Unbelievable.
So, yes, absolutely. So the bigger getting bigger, what does that mean? And how do you even define large anymore, right? We used to be large. We were invited to large firm forums when we were $2 billion.
Yeah.
But that's because there's such a large tail of small. But even the small are getting bigger because they're being absorbed by the aggregators. And many breakaways are starting to join existing firms versus starting their own firms. So that's also feeding. So yes, talking an awful lot about scale in this industry. There's not an event that I don't go to where there's a ton of technology being shared to create better opportunities, right? Technology is an enabler. You mentioned earlier on in our discussion that it's all about the people, the relationships. This is a people business. So we're not looking to have the technology replace that human interaction, but we certainly are looking forward to it making us more and more efficient. And right now it's an industry that has best in class tools and solutions, right? There's not one big package that you tend to buy when you go out and get your CRM and your portfolio management tool and your advice tool, your planning tools, etc. And then you try your best to tie them all together. And we're getting better at it, but wow, it's still tons of opportunity there. So we're always looking for opportunities to improve processes. We're very heavy Salesforce users, as are many, and we've got some terrific talent that's always thinking about workflow options and opportunities and reporting capabilities and really just putting as much information, dashboards, putting as much information in front of the advisor at their fingertips to make them as efficient as possible. And then, as I mentioned, when you have all these various different subject matter experts, that collaboration is very important. So technology is a critical enabler there so that everybody's talking the same language on a client's behalf, and just making sure that we have a lot of coordination and collaboration in advance of a given client deliverable.
This podcast is brought to you by Turncast. We make game-changing content for fintech and financial services companies. Learn more at turncast.com.
Hey, this is Judd Mackerel. Thanks for listening to this show. I just wanted to ask you one question. What's your technology and data strategy for 2025? If you can't clearly answer that question, I'd love to talk. We are spending some specific time with select firms to really go deep and help you clearly answer that question. We believe that it's one of the things that often holds back firms from really achieving their potential, from really achieving growth, and really getting a lot of the things in the position that they need to be. The things that are holding up the way that you scale, like your workflows, how you manage data around your revenue, how you report all of that to your advisors, and getting clarity in all those things. I'm sure there's a lot of very specific things to your business that are really important as well, and we'd love to talk about that. If this is interesting to you, hit me up with an email. My direct email is judd@milemarker.co, and I'd love to hear from you, hear what you're working on, hear what your strategy is, and see if there's an opportunity for us to help you get more clear on that strategy in 2025. Thanks.
All right. let's talk about kind of staying on that path, but a little bit of a different avenue. So you brought up and you mentioned consolidators or aggregators or, whatever term they want to use, but it's no secret that a lot of this industry is growing via acquisition. And I think that that's contributing to this scale question. But I also think about how firms are operating while taking down these bigger and bigger acquisitions. So you all had a pretty sizable acquisition of a firm that was about $1 billion in AUM, quite a few employees. There was a lot of kind of complexity in this acquisition that you all just managed. So I'm curious to hear you talk through how you guys did that so effectively, because that sounds like a project that would be pretty challenging and that would require navigating at a really high level. And I think a lot of people can learn from those types of experiences. So give us the case study, a little bit of that experience.
It is definitely something that when you think about acquisitions, it's not for the faint of heart. There's a saying out there, just because you can afford a practice doesn't mean you can absorb a practice. It's a lot of hard work. And there's a lot of work up front in really making sure that you are thinking through as much of the details as possible, particularly as it relates to the client experience and the employee experience. And the clients I actually find to be the easier of the two because they trust their advisor team. As the clients will tend to say to the advisor, is this a good change? Are you okay? And are you still going to be my guy or girl? And if you tell me everything's going to be okay, I trust that everything's going to be okay. And then when you get into the details of onboarding 20 new employees into an organization, that definitely can be a little harder. You really are thinking through reporting structures and a lot of systems change, a lot of process change. You're trying to integrate. If you're not going to integrate and you're not going to come to some best practice of how you're going to be doing work on behalf of our clients going forward, then you just lost all of the scale and efficiency opportunity. So we really went at this last acquisition, which was sizable, open-minded to learning who was optimizing, basically. And so, maybe there was a data collection tool that Wescott was using, and there was a data collection tool that the firm we were acquiring were using. We'd evaluate both tools and decide how might we want to proceed going forward, or is there something new and different that we would want to do? And so we were really trying to create the best platform of the future through this opportunity. And there were a couple changes that we made that were very specific to a client segment. And those changes were purposeful. We really had to invest the time and energy into thinking through where we would want to make change and why and what the implications would be. I would say also it doesn't happen overnight. So my experience tells me, and this would be change management experience that I'm taking from my project management days at Vanguard, and then also leveraging that through this very large acquisition that we just did, about 18 months really for the dust to settle on something like this for somebody that is our size and doing an acquisition. Now that is different from the aggregators, right? The aggregators, yes, I had a playbook, but the aggregators have a playbook, right? So there is a lot more process and they have more guidelines and guardrails as to, where they're interested in making change and not making change. And Monday morning, you're just going to wake up and, this is the way things are going to happen, but you're signing up for that, right? You're signing up for that as you are deciding to join said aggregator. But there's also a lot of positives to the growth that's taking place. I'm thinking now about the buying power. This is an industry that has not historically had a lot of buying power.
Yeah.
We're now enabled to negotiate favorable terms with service providers. That's a whole new ballgame. Tech stacks being managed by expert teams, continually optimized, larger brands, bigger marketing investment. We've got some power now, right? Everybody's heard of Vanguard. How many people have heard of ABC RIA
Right.
if they're not in your community? The ability to attract and develop top talent, brand recognition really matters there. And I have to at least mention compliance once because that's one of the hats that I wear.
Sure.
But the regulatory environment is becoming so much more complex and larger firms are better positioned to manage those demands. They can invest in either dedicated compliance teams or outsource, pay to outsource, crypto, AI, fintech, cybersecurity responsibility, growing operational complexity oversight, and all of the reporting. I mean, the wealth of reporting that needs to be managed, the list goes on. So I think that's an area that when we think about benefits of size and scale and resourcing appropriately is of interest.
Okay, that leads me to a couple of questions. I'm going to try and we'll ask them sequentially, I guess. But I've heard for people that are doing acquisitions, there's sort of two paths for firms like Wescott. One path is consolidate everything into one tech stack because this is our playbook. Like you were saying, hey, we have a playbook. You're coming here because you're choosing our playbook. I don't care what you're using as a part of this. We're going to do the conversion. We're going to move you, et cetera. Or the other side is, hey, what you're using seems to be working. We're looking to bring together firms that are having success, and then we're just going to hopefully superpower your success with some things that we have, but keep using the technology that you're using, et cetera, et cetera. Our team will work on it. What is Wescott's approach to that? Are you looking to consolidate all of the tech into the stack that you've chosen as the best stack, or are you letting people keep using what they're using?
Absolutely the former. I don't know that allowing for all of the various different models is something that a firm will be able to continue for maybe a short duration of time, right? While you're digesting, but the loss of efficiency and collaboration opportunity, I think, doesn't make a lot of sense to me, quite frankly. So absolutely moving everybody into one set of systems, one set of processes. That being said, there is segmentation that takes place. So every experience is not the same. I'll use this example. The firm that we acquired, the large firm that we acquired, had a niche with Merck executives.
Okay, interesting.
Merck, the organization. And so there were certain processes that were very specific to the Merck experience, I will call it. And we, again, purposefully made the decision as to keeping that client segment and a few of those experiences different from the rest of the population of clients, but also be thinking about where that experience could be leveraged. So there's still some differentiation maybe in process. We don't have any differentiation in tools, I will say. Okay. But I do think of it from a client segmentation perspective, there certainly can be some differentiation if there is a need. But it's something to really think through.
Okay, I love that. All right, and then you talked about niches that advisors serve, but I'm curious to know the types of firms that Wescott is trying to bring on or approach. Is it they're already independent? Are you looking to take breakaway teams from a wirehouse that's coming and they're going to join you all as an established platform? Are you taking people out of broker dealers? All of the above? How do you all identify the type of firm that's a good fit for Wescott?
We have not yet absorbed a breakaway. I'm not saying that we wouldn't be open-minded to that. The acquisitions that we've done so far have been brought to us. So we're not really knocking on doors. These were firms that were interested in a succession plan and knew reputationally of us in the region as a platform provider and or knew our people. So it was either firm related recognition or advisor related recognition, and came to us and said, we're interested in talking about how we might be able to partner together. So clearly we're not serial acquirers, but we have had conversations, opportunistic conversations that have settled very nicely. They've been, regional acquisitions. So we now feel really good about the greater Philadelphia area, I will say, and having a really strong reputation and footprint in that area.
Okay, so we've talked about some technology tools. We've talked about scale being relative, things like that. And we've talked about consolidation. I think these all touch on trends that are happening in the industry. So this is the part of the show where I want to ask you to get out your crystal ball. I want you to look into the future a little bit and talk to me about some of the things or trends that you are trying to best position and prepare Wescott for as you look into the future a little bit.
Yeah, this is not probably a unique thought, but I do absolutely agree with many thought leaders within this industry who are saying that there will be 5, 7, nine, I'm not sure quite the right number, mega firms in the next 5 or 7 years. And I think some of those firms exist today. And I think some of those firms will form over that period of time. But, again, going back to the bigger getting bigger, the dozen or so that are over $50 billion already now, and, what that really is going to mean from an industry perspective. Now, one of the things that I think about, I was attracted to this industry. I made, we talked about my leap from large corporate environment to a more boutique RIA. And one of the things that really attracted me to the industry is the collaborative nature, right? There's a lot of information sharing. We're a very friendly organization and we help each other out. And even though maybe we compete, it doesn't seem like we compete. And maybe because in most cases, we were regional in nature and now there's a lot more national firms out there. But as you get larger, I think you tend to look inward a lot more so. And you're thinking about that scale and your processes and all of the things, and you're focused inward. And I'm hoping we don't lose that community that we have, that sharing, that information sharing. And I think these large players also need to be thinking about the balance. And, as we're going, we're thinking about it absolutely and how we compete. But that balance between the entrepreneurial, client-centric focus that the RIA community is so well known for, and how that's now being married together with corporate infrastructure.
Yeah.
Private equity investing and things of that nature, right? So how do you balance those two things? And I think the winners who emerge are going to be the ones that can figure out how to balance that appropriately.
I think that's great perspective. Going back to the whole concept of scale is relative. I find it interesting because we all look up to a handful of these firms that are there's a dozen firms north of 50 billion. But just for perspective, right? 3 of the wirehouses that I can think off the top of my head, UBS, Merrill Lynch, and Morgan Stanley, all brought in more than 50 billion in net new assets last year alone.
Yeah, they're gigantic. Absolutely.
Yeah. So, I think on one hand, you could say there's still so much room to run for these RIAs. And on the other hand, we are so far away from some number of mega firms, because when you have wealth management firms bringing in more assets and net new flows in a year than are all of the assets combined of some of these firms, I think we've just got a ways to go before we can say there's a handful of mega firms that have scooped up and consumed all of the industry in some ways. So there will always be a long tail, I think.
There will be a long tail for a long time.
Carrie, we're going to move into the final segment of the show. We call this the Milemarker Minute. It's a series of lightning round questions aimed to be lighthearted, getting to know you outside of the industry as a person a little bit more and understanding you better. So you ready for the Milemarker Minute?
I am ready.
All right, let's do it. My first question is, if you could travel anywhere in the world that you've never been to before, where would you go?
I would do an African safari.
I love it. Great answer. Okay, are you a beach or a mountains person?
I am a mountains person.
Okay. What is the best flavor of ice cream?
One of my favorites. I love ice cream, so that's a tough one. But I'm going to go real specific here. Penn State Creamery mint chocolate chip.
Excellent. All right. See, I love this. This question's become one of my favorites because we're learning about all these local dairy places and stuff that it's like, I feel like I'm going to add a bucket list trip. What is the best book you've read or listened to in the past year?
I am a reader. I don't listen to books. So I am definitely a reader. And I like that physical nature of flipping the pages. So probably some recency bias to this one because I literally just finished The Psychology of Money.
Yeah, great book.
Yeah, Morgan Housel. And the timing was just right? As you're thinking about the environment and the fact that our advisors are now the financial behaviors of individuals. So I just very much enjoyed it. And the timing was good.
Awesome. I love that. All right. There's an alternate universe, Carrie. So in this universe that we're talking, you're the president, COO, and CCO at Wescott. But in this alternate universe, you have an entirely different career. What career does Carrie have in the alternate universe?
She is a florist.
Oh, okay. I like it.
And it's successful enough, she owns her own shop.
Okay. Commercial florist or residential florist or all of the above?
Let's go residential.
I like it. Awesome. You made it through the Milemarker Minute. This was a very fun conversation. It's not often, it's actually never have I talked to somebody who has a B Corp as an RIA, who's a part of the Net Positive Consortium, and who has such a focus on creating differentiation by doing things that are more inclusive, things like that. I think everybody desires to do good. You've put it at the heart of the firm, and not only done that, but you're growing. And I don't say this lightly. I think there's a lot of firms out there who are so idealistic, it harms them from being successful. And I think you all have done just an incredible job of having a great mindset while also building a really incredible and successful business. So thanks for sharing some insights with us and having a wonderful conversation today.
Terrific. Thank you so much for having me.
It was a pleasure. All right, everybody, that's been another episode of Next Mile. Please make sure you click follow or subscribe wherever you're paying attention to this. And if you'd be kind enough, leave us a review so that people who've never heard of the show before can find great conversations like the one I just had with Carrie. But until the next episode, enjoy every mile.